It's gonna be alright.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Johnversations, where it's not just a conversation, it's a Johnversation. And I am joined today by one of my friends from NRB's past, the last two at least, Tim Mahoney with Thinking Man Pictures. It is so good to have you back, Tim.
I love the name Johnversations.
You know what? It works, right?
It really works well, yeah.
So Tim is with Thinking Man Pictures. Make sure I get that.
Thinking Man Films.
Films,
Yep.
okay. And has been doing this for quite a while. The most recent series of films that you've put out is about the seven churches of Revelation. Correct?
Correct. Well, that was in the last year, yes.
Yeah.
But we've continued on with another brand of films called Patterns of Evidence.
Yes.
So we have both Seven Churches of Revelation, Times of Fire, and Times of Deception. And we have Journey to Mount Sinai 1 and 2 that came out, which are Patterns of Evidence films as well.
Yeah, and that was the most recent release.
Yes.
It was a Fathom event distribution, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And these films are they're unusual because they are absolutely beautifully shot. Documentary takes the viewer right into the middle of the biblical experience, and you're not going to see a documentary like this. It's absolutely stunning stuff. Powerful message to the church. What got you involved in this kind of thing?
Well, originally I felt the call when I was 18 years old. I went to see a film by Billy Graham Association. They had a motion picture division called Worldwide Pictures.
Yeah.
And I had not been to a movie when I was a kid. I grew up in a conservative Christian home and didn't go to movies. And when the television broke, we didn't get a new one. So I was starved for visual information.
Yeah.
And I heard about this movie called The Hiding Place.
Wow, yeah.
The Hiding Place, and I asked if I could go, and my mom said yes. And that was my, there's maybe something about it, but waiting until you're 18 years old to see a movie in a theater, it was transformative for me, and I ended up going twice, more. So I saw it 3 times in a row because it was so powerful. And that's basically then when I went to Bible college, I went and got an Associate of Arts degree, and then I was going to go into Christian radio. And I loved radio. I used to hang out at a radio station, and I thought that was it. And then I heard this ad on the radio for a film school, and that I thought, wow, I didn't know that was a possibility. And local community college had a film, department, and I ended up going there, and it was just a thrill to be a part of all that. I had no idea how to do anything, but I hung with it, and I was able to, eventually, it took a long time. I met my wife, got married, and we started having children, and I built a recording studio in our basement, thinking that might be a start to getting into media. And eventually I made a documentary, and that got me a job at an ad agency. And my heart to make films about the Bible, about our faith, was still there. And eventually I left that and started my own company, and I thought I don't want to lose the call.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you feel like you could be distracted by just keeping up with house payments and keeping up with life, and that just so happened that in Minneapolis, this Christian Film Library Association was having an event there, and I got caught wind of it, and I went to the first one, and it was something that I said I had no idea there's a group of people, just like we're here at National Religious Broadcasters, that had the same interest in calling. And that was probably 35 years ago.
Wow.
And I, from that point on, I wasn't in the industry, I was in advertising, but I continued to take family vacations just to keep the vision alive. And eventually, without me even realizing it, I started helping with the projectors and, screens. I was the AV guy.
Yeah.
And my heart ached, because I saw all these people making movies, and I was like the woman who wanted to have children working in the nursery.
Yeah.
I'd get to hold them for a little bit, and then they would go away.
Yeah.
And but I said, Lord, if I never make any films for you, I'll pray for those that do.
Mm.
And eventually the Lord gave me the project with the Exodus, and I've been at that for over 20 some years now.
Wow. And how many titles later now?
Well, there's 6 Patterns of Evidence. Patterns of Evidence Exodus, the Moses Controversy, the Red Sea Miracle 1, Red Sea Miracle 2, Journey to Mount Sinai 1 and 2. Then we made a film called The Journey Home, and then the 7 Churches of Revelation, which I didn't make, but I helped her produce. Those are made out of France.
Wow. Okay. And so you have another project that is coming in 2025. The American Miracle. This sounds very exciting, Tim. Tell me about American Miracle.
Yes, this is a project about written by from a book. A New York Times best-selling author, Michael Medved, wrote the book The American Miracle. And during COVID, I was, asking the Lord, well, what's going to happen next, and concerned that this might be, the end of our work or whatever, like a lot of people.
Right. Yeah.
And I felt the Lord, the Holy Spirit, speak to me, and I felt like the Lord said, I want you to be open to doing more. Because I have slated out a long list of Patterns of Evidence films.
Yeah.
There's 49, episodes that we could do. And because afterwards I said, Lord, what should I do? And he said, well, cast a vision. So we've casted a vision for that. But now he's saying, I want you to be open to doing more. And I was like, well, I think we got a lot going on here. But okay. Once I said yes, literally about a week later, I got a phone call from a person about doing a film on prayer and revival. And I'm moving then more towards theatrical films.
Yeah.
So we have Thinking Man Films, which is the documentary focused, and then we've got Heroic Pictures. Heroic Pictures is that there are many heroes and heroic events that have happened that show that God has acted in the lives of people or in events. And I actually talked to Michael earlier about this idea, and he said, Tim, I love it. And then I didn't hear from him for a while. And then later he called me and said, Tim, would you be open to taking my book, The American Miracle, and helping me make it into something? And I thought, well, I need to pray about this before I do it, because I realize how much there is to do.
Yeah.
And I prayed about it, and then God allowed us to put together a fantastic team. Doug Maddox is our business manager, and he's a producer on this, and an executive producer, and he produced the film Undaunted with Josh McDowell and many other films. And we also did bring in Ralph Augstros, and he is an executive producer, and he did a film Against the Tide, so with John Lennox. So we've been able to come together as a team, and now we're going to be filming this summer. We have a script. John Groders, who did John.
No stranger to NRB, for sure.
Right, yeah. He won the awards last year, I think, Sabina, and he also did Tortured for Christ films, and he's very talented. He wrote the script. And so we're out now in the casting and location mode, pre-production.
Yeah. Well, I joked before we went on hit record that you're the hardest working guy in this industry. You were literally just finished a 900-mile scout for this, and got on a plane and came to NRB and are talking it up, and then you'll be heading out to Europe and doing some more filming while you're there as well. So
yeah.
It's crazy stuff. I know it's rewarding though to go from that woman in the nursery mindset to now.
I worked in a body shop. My family had a body shop. My uncle had one, and I painted cars from the time I was 18 years old till I was 30.
Wow. And
I had multiple accidents. And if there's anybody out there listening and you're wondering, Lord, and you feel like you have a call in your life, and you're wondering, we don't, I think there are times when we have, in my own case, I gave it back to the Lord. I said, really feel like I'm supposed to be a filmmaker, but I don't see it happening. Even though I went to film school and I had this recording studio in my basement, I think what's important is that we basically lay it at the altar. Abraham wanted a son. And when he finally got one, the Lord later on said, would you give him back to me?
Wow, yeah.
And I found that to be the case. I eventually became the president of the Christian Film Association called International Christian Visual Media. And And so I realized I wasn't going to be making any films. I felt like the Lord called me to serve other filmmakers. And the first night, I feel like I should share this with you. The first night of the opening ceremony, I said to the Lord, well, what is the theme? You know, because we have people from different parts of the world coming. And it's like, well, every conference has a theme. And I said, Lord, what would it be? And he said, I felt after about a week of prayer, it was prepare the way of the Lord. And so I really understand that the Lord is coming, you know. So we're supposed to prepare the way of the Lord. And I think that's a message for all of us because the Lord is coming. How do we prepare the way? But the Lord said, you don't do it, you do it backwards for a project. I said, well, what does that mean? He says, you need to know, is the project of the Lord? What is the way? And am I prepared? And so I said, well, theologically now, how am I supposed to explain that? And he says, use Abraham. Abraham was given a promise that he would be the father of a great nation, and that through his seed all nations would be blessed. And so it was of the Lord. And I think it's important for anybody who's listening to this that if they have something the Lord's called them to, you have to discern, is it really of the Lord or is it just of me, of my own flesh? Is it something I just want to do? And some people can just go do whatever they want to do. But eventually we're all going to stand before the Lord, and he's going to, there's going to be a fire, it says. And what's good, you know, what's wood, hay, and stubble is going to be gone. What's gold and silver and, you know, precious is going to be there. And so if it's of the Lord, then the hard part is what's the way? You know, for Abraham, it took a long time for him to I mean, he and Sarah were past the time they could have
significantly.
So it's going to be miraculous. And I think that's a word for all of us, is that sometimes the Lord calls us to do things that are miraculous, and we have to wait on the Lord. Now, there's sometimes, and I would say what I've learned about this is that there are times when Abraham did, in following the Lord, just have to leave where he was and go for a long walk. And he walked all the way and walked the promised land, right? So there's some times when we need to just take a step of faith. But there's other times we have to be cautious because God said that he and Sarah were going to have a child. And then over time, though, Abraham reinterpreted that idea that Sarah would, or that Hagar would.
Right.
I think all these callings are important, that we are cautious about how we fulfill them, because that wasn't God's plan. Then you end up with that consequence.
Right.
And the third part of it, so I would say, is it of the Lord? What is the way? And then the third part is this. Does this, is prepared? I said, is it like the movie Rocky where, you know, you're going to have this big fight and you're doing push-ups and sit-ups and you're running up steps and, you know, all that. And the Lord said, no, you have to be, are you prepared to give the very thing the Lord has given you or called you to do back to the Lord? That's what Abraham had to do. He had to give it back to the Lord.
Yeah.
And when you're ready to do that, then he goes, okay, now I've got somebody because you love me more than the calling. And I think it's something we have to be cautious of. If you're a person that loves to make films, that you don't love making films more than you love the Lord, because then you can go into disobedience, or if you want to be a songwriter or whatever, we can love the thing that we want to do because it's more about us than it is about the Lord. Because the Lord might say, wait until I give you the right idea, or wait until I give you the right song, or wait until I give you the right story. Now, I'm talking to creative people right now.
Right.
But it might be somebody who's doing a ministry. So these are difficult things, but if we spend time in the Bible and reading and time in prayer and time in the right kind of fellowship, it'll help us to discern those.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know we were going to be getting a sermon, but I'm very grateful for it. Because, you know, here at NRB especially, there are so many examples of people that are doing big things, or at least they're presenting that they're doing big things. But I know when they go back to their hotel room, if they're like me, they sit there and they go, I'm not doing enough, and it's not happening like I want it to yet. And I'm talking to all these people that have done a thing, and I can't get that thing out of the door yet, you know. And I actually was texting my wife last night, and I was talking about some of these kinds of things, and I just got overcome with frustration, is the nice way of putting it, I guess. And I just grabbed my Bible and I said, Lord, I need a word from you. And I don't recommend this as a way to do your devotional life, but I just I felt God say, go to Philippians. And I started reading the first chapter of Philippians, and I got to that verse that says, I am confident in this, that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. And when I read that, that's all I needed, was that reminder that if this is God's thing, it's on God's agenda. And if he started it, he always finishes what he starts, Mm-hmm. And so a powerful lesson from the life of Abraham. And I imagine this kind of showed up in your Sinai series recently.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, I'm going to mention something about worship. One of the things that we're all feeling is that the world is becoming more strange and more difficult. And as I was making the film, Journey to Mount Sinai Part 2, I was last summer coming out of a coffee shop. Our church actually has a coffee shop attached to it. And this pastor from the inner city, he looked at me and he said, how's it going, Tim? And I said, I don't even know where to start, and he said, I knew when he said this, it wasn't just him talking. Mm. He said, you need to spend more time in worship. Mm. He says, in worship, and you need to have a deeper, with the type of things that you're working on, you need to spend more time with the Lord. I'm going to tell you something. So I went home and I ended up getting my guitar out, and I said to my wife, we need to spend time in worship tonight. Now, sometimes you think, well, we worship on Sunday morning or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But what I think the Lord is showing me, and what he's trying to tell me, is that worship is very important. So we got out the car, and I found some songbooks that we had from the 70s or 80s,
Yeah.
And we started worshiping the Lord. And a lot of the fear, a lot of the discouragement was disappearing. Mm. When there's that song. Do you know the song "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus"?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know the lyrics.
Turn your eyes upon, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will go strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Yeah,
that's a tremendous song. That's a Ethel Mahoney type of song. My mother was a pianist at the church. Mm. We made a movie called The Journey Home, and The Journey Home is my own personal testimony. Rick Altizer made that film, and I asked him to. I said, it's hard to give yourself your own haircut, and I said I need to tell the story about how we made these films. And he said he started making and telling a story about my own life, and I'd never told some of these things. And I actually filmed my wife and I in the first part of the interview, and then what happened was we shifted the cameras and everything, and then I was going to film me. And I, for 2 hours, he started asking questions that no one had ever asked before, and I wept. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult. He touched, he's asking questions that opened up deep pain. Mm-hmm. And I'd not talked about any of those things. We get done with the interview after 2 hours, and I realized that when I moved the camera over to the other angle, I did not plug the audio in. And I said, I couldn't believe it. He said, Tim, the Lord knows. It's going to be okay. He was assuring me. And he said, let's do it again. The best thing that could have happened was that I had 10 those 2 hours of sobbing, and I was able then to share reasonably, insanely, this backstory. But turning your eyes upon Jesus. So I go back to this question of worship, and you might have people listening right now, and they're struggling. And I think with the Lord, we were created to worship the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to start incorporating worship more in my own presentations with people. In my own personal life, in my own personal devotion, my wife and I will spend more time in worship. And because I think in the area of worship, the Lord reveals, first of all, it's what we were created to do. Mm-hmm. We kind of align ourselves into the harmony and the presence and the peace of the Lord. And that's a completely different place. And so that's what I'm thankful for.
Yeah.
That I've learned that in the making of Journey to Mount Sinai, because the Israelites were told to go to Mount Sinai to worship God.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, you can tell we have had more than a talk about movies. This is why I love Tim Mahoney, because the Spirit just exudes out of him, and it shows up in his movies, but it shows up in his life, and that's why I count you as a dear friend.
Thank you.
And even though we only see each other and occasionally email each other,
Yeah.
I look forward to more of that, and I'm so grateful for your time today, Tim.
Yeah,
thank you so
Todd.
much. All right.
Yeah.
And folks can stay in touch with the projects that you're working on. How do they get there?
patternsofevidence.com for the Patterns of Evidence investigative biblical films, and then heroic.pictures for the American Miracle.
All right. And this is coming out next in a year and a half, to 2025. You're going to want to mark your calendars once you can get a date for that. Anyway, thank you so much, Tim, for being with us, and really appreciate you speaking into our audience today.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, remember, it's not just a conversation, it's a Johnversation. And until we meet again, it's going to be all right.